I'm going to hand it over to Mike here for some update on the Paycheck Protection Program and what we're seeing on this front.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. I know from the poll that there's a lot of people very interested in these PPP updates, so here's the segment for you. We did get a lot of guidance in the last 2 weeks from the Department of Treasury. We'll talk about their May 15th guidance and their further May 22nd guidance. Do want to make a big caveat, we're not accountants, and just as you wouldn't want to go to your accountant for advice on employee discrimination claim, don't really want to come to us exactly for accounting advice. Run any of this by your accountant, but we just want to make you aware of kind of the top level of what these changes are, so that you can discuss it as it applies to you. First off, on May 15th, there was new guidance there was a lot of questions about, payroll and what payroll expenses would be covered, how does the 8-week period work? And they updated that guidance to explain that, it can be essentially during the covered period that starts when the loan is dispersed, or an alternative payroll covered period that starts from the first day of the first pay period after the loan. So talk to your accountant there. There may be some flexibility about when you start the 8-week period for purposes of counting your payroll expenses. There was more guidance on the amount that owners could be forgiven for payments themselves. Essentially, it caps it around the same as, employees are capped at $100,000 annual equivalent. And the Treasury said that for owners, it would be, your 8-week equivalent from 2019, but capped at $15,000, which is, an 8-week share of $100,000. And then there's clarified, what does full-time equivalent mean for purposes of this loan forgiveness for potential reduction? Was it 30 hours? Was it 40 hours? And the Treasury said it's 40 hours. And they explained how to calculate that on an employee-by-employee basis. And then there was, further clarification on, the safe harbor reduction for, if you laid off employees in February, March, and April, this idea that you can hire back up to the full-time equivalent by the end of June. They provided some more clarification on how that works. And then May 20th.
I wanted to jump in there really quick, Mike, too, on that cap for owners. This was new from this May 15th guidance. We hadn't seen any of this before, and they clarified it was the lower of these two, so the $15,385 or the 8-week equivalent of 2019. So the owners couldn't start paying themselves more than what they received in 2019 under the PPP. So that was pretty big guidance coming out on this May 15th issue.
Yeah, and then on May 22nd, they clarified it further on the owner pay cap. Goes to the lesser of 852 fractionals of your compensation from 2019 at no more than $15,385. They further clarified there's some questions. What payroll expenses are eligible, salary and whatnot, but what about bonuses and hazard pay? Are those eligible for forgiveness? And the Department of Treasury said, yes, they are, but keep in mind there's still that prorated $100,000 annual salary cap for the employees as well. There's more clarification on, for the non-payroll costs, when is the period that those have to be incurred or paid? They explain that to be in order to qualify for forgiveness, must be paid during the 8-week period or incurred during the 8-week period and paid at the next regular billing cycle. So again, talk to your accountants to make sure that your payments are qualifying for that forgiveness. Something here that we can, weigh in on a lot more as employment counsel is, there's this concern about, well, what if I need to rehire my employees, but they don't want to come back? Is that going to be counted against me on the payroll, on the forgiveness reduction? And a few weeks ago, they had said, no, if you make a good faith offer in writing and it's rejected, if you document the offer and the rejection, you'll be good. They further clarified that, so now you also, the employer is going to have to notify the state unemployment office of the rejection within 30 days. They haven't exactly explained what you have to notify, or if there's a form, or what they're looking for specifically, but they said stay tuned. They're going to have further guidance on that, and we have a link here to all of those new clarifications on that issue. Anthony?
Great, thanks, Mike. Yeah, and then here this week, again, so many moving parts, and and we get into this issue with the PPP, and it's probably all subject to change as we see this Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act. This new bill got approved by the House yesterday. It's making its way to the Senate, and from what I understand, the president said he would approve it if it passes. And this, from the House, the bill that we saw is changing some of the terms of the PPP program. And as many of you on the webinar have voiced complaints about, it's looking to change the cover period from 8 weeks out to 24 weeks to give employers more time to use the money. And actually, we're coming up on that 8-week period right now for a lot of employers that got the money early on. So we're coming up on that deadline, and it looks like they're going to push it out to 24 weeks. I saw prior versions of the bill saying that it could possibly go out to the end of the year. So we'll see how that changes, if it changes at all with the Senate or president. And then also they're considering changing the deadline to rehire full-time equivalent employees to December 31st, 2020, as opposed to the June 30th deadline that currently is in place. And then there's also talk about changing this 75% requirement that the loan has to be sent. 75% of the loan has to be spent on payroll-related benefits, pay and benefits, and only 25% could be spent on other issues. They're looking to change that and maybe possibly having a 60-40 split. And then to the extent the employer is not forgiven, the loan's not forgiven, and it turns into a loan. Currently, it's a 2-year term. They're looking to push that the term out to 5 years. So stay tuned. The Senate has actually been working on its own bill as well. They didn't vote on it prior to convening for the week. So it'd be interesting to see if this gets changed at all next week, and as it's working its way through the Senate and to the president next week. So stay tuned. We'll have more updates next week.